Hey,
Hey,
Dion,
Dion.
you upgraded. Nice. Good to see you. How are you doing, Dion?
Good to be here. Thank you. I'm excited to talk about art, and I appreciate the opportunity. And let's begin.
Let's do it.
All right. So, again, for those of you who are new to this, so this is a studio visit for a show called LA Stories at Brenau Galleries at pardon me, at Brenau University. And so the show is really about LA artists, West Coast artists, on in at Brenau, and like again, exhibiting and being part of their rich collection and part of the rich exhibitions that they have there. Which when I was there a couple of years ago, I looked through like all the old flyers that were around of like the artists that did residencies at Brenau, and I was absolutely blown away by the names of the artists that came in, and I think that that had a lot to do with Leo Castelli being the president of the board at Brenau,
Mhm.
and the developing the collection at Brenau because of that. So all that kind of like contributed to this like rich history of art on the campus. The other thing that's so impressive about it is that their collection is also displayed on the campus. So nothing is warehoused. It's all out there and it's all for everybody to see and enjoy. So it's like living, you walk down the hall and wow, hey, there's a beautiful Louise Nevelson, you know. Oh, and right next to it is like a Christo print and like so on. It's really pretty amazing. And I don't know of a lot of campuses that have that. But speaking of which, Dion is the gallery director at Laverne University. Is that correct, Dion?
Yes.
Excellent. So I don't want to I want to focus today on Dion, the artist, but I think it's an interesting kind of side note to see that, and what a lot of artists have to do to kind of survive too.
Well, there is a great rapport that I have with many artists that I've
Yeah.
worked with and curated with. Paul, I know you through that type of relationship. We know each other through other artists that we've shown with. And so I don't see it as separate as I see just a part of like how I have this great network of artists that I know and has grown through the years. So
Yeah.
in that way, it's very vital.
Yeah, absolutely. And um, I completely agree with you because I ran a gallery, as you know, for 18 years, a college gallery, and I felt the same way that it was more. I didn't really see a huge distinction between the different activities. Just like curating a show for me, I take the same approach as I do as an artist to my artwork. Like how am I putting this together? How am I conceiving of it? How am I arranging the work of the artist? So I see it as a very creative activity, as you do as well, and of course Nicole, who's done such a spectacular job at Brenau. They're
Thank
they're
you.
they're very lucky to have her. They're very
Well,
Indeed.
I'm
lucky to have her.
I'm lucky to be here. Every day feels like it's something new. So what's so exciting about this show for me is, as you mentioned, we've had a lot of really amazing personalities and artists here on campus and in our collection, but so many of them are focused on the East Coast. So
Hmm.
having this West Coast artist exposure has been just absolutely, I think, mind blowing. It's widened our horizons so much. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. And
Yeah.
there's Dion's piece right behind me there. I'm in the gallery right now. So
Yeah, that's Dion's painting, which Dion, I love your work. I love your paintings. I think they like when you started doing them, I was really taken back, because you had an older body of work that I also really enjoyed and really appreciated. And then you made a switch. And the switch was, I mean, unannounced to me, it would, as for me, I just saw it one day. You showed me the paintings and, oh, wow, this is like a completely different direction. And I mean, so much of it was really fresh. And hopefully, can you talk about making that change, that transition from like this older body of work? In a lot of ways, if I can just add something, that I felt like you were in the process of redefining who you were as an artist, and I personally gained a lot of inspiration from that.
Well, thank you. Let me sort of take that piece by piece. I think that the way you and I relate to each other's work and other artists we know is really important. And I think I was influenced by, other artists that I really, sort of felt a kindred spirit to. You're someone who uses imagery in different ways in different bodies of work, and that's something that I used to do. And there was this sense, I would say, maybe let's look at it spatially, that I was creating abstract paintings that had fragments of imagery kind of woven into them. But there was this sense of spatiality where you kind of had to look into the paintings to sort of get to that information. Things were smaller scale. And something kind of happened to me where I thought if I kind of like, not necessarily empty things out, but push things forward so that the paintings were not kind of like something we would go to, but something that was more active coming at us. And then the viewer would then be the imagery or the participant figure in the paintings. And so it was this kind of like flip around, and color became more intense. Scale shifts and everything were more directed at someone looking at the painting. And so that would be the kind of pivot, or maybe a relationship from one body of work to another.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but also there was, you had imagery in your older paintings. And so that seemed like it was like that's where I saw like a big jump. Of course, the color palette as well, but there was a big jump in like abandoning the imagery, and so could you talk about that a little bit as well?
Yes, I think the images that I use were things that I was fascinated by. They could be diagrams, they could be from photos I took, or maybe flowers and different sorts of things that would be a vehicle for color. And I think I worked through so many different sets of images that at a certain point I worked my way out of the images I wanted to explore. And as maybe my options became, not that I ran out of things to do, but I kind of fulfilled what I
Hmm.
wanted to explore in that, then
Yeah.
working without imagery seemed much more wide open, and it continues to provide more options and variables for me. And so as you sort of work through ideas, or as one body of work changes, I continually want to challenge myself and look for new territory. And that's where I ended up and where I am now.
Yeah, it seems to me, from looking at the older body of work and looking at the more current body of work, that you went from providing imagery for the viewer instead to providing sensation to them. There's a sensation that we get when we look at these images, and some of the things that we've talked about in the past, I thought were really relevant. Some of them, the sensation of like maybe being inside of a cathedral, or it might be a cathedral, a mosque, or something where you've got this very large kind of open space above that you're looking up, and there's the kind of abstract geometric architecture in that space, and looking up, and that kind of like wonderment. And that to me seems like a very perfect analogy for the sensation I get for looking at your paintings.
Thank you, Paul. That's a really elegant way of putting it. I don't think I could say it better than that. Maybe just to
Wait, but you do,
add.
Dion, and you say it in your paintings.
Okay, yes. Well, yeah, I feel like there is a influence of architecture, like someone like
Hmm.
Eero Saarinen. There's this influence of like the sky and Joshua Tree in the morning, that sort of pink glow sort of stretching across the sky. And so as immaterial as you know, a colorful sky is, while there is this curvature structure of architecture, those two things come together in my paintings in a way where they're not this, not that, but together they become something more fulfilling and like a sensation. It's immaterial, but it is impactful.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, as you were talking, I had images of like James Turrell, you know, that, and I think this is a really interesting time for painters too, because I think we kind of have to reassess what painting means, you know, in the Instagram age, you know, where like the majority of the world is seeing your work on a little tiny screen, you know, that big. And what does that mean exactly? And how is that impacting the way that the world interprets painting? Where is it now? You know, I mean, where are the superstar painters now? Before, you know, we had Warhol, and we had these kind of larger than life figures in the art world, but now we've kind of shifted away from that. And I can't think of any offhand that, you know, have that kind of like celebrity impact. And I almost feel like our stature in the world, in the, you know, the larger context, has really diminished quite a bit, in some ways. And I don't even see that as a bad thing necessarily. I just see it like, well, this is just the way it is. You know, it's the way it is. And because I think, you know, we have so many other ways of consuming images. You know, the world is just like, I mean, we are just bombarded with imagery every day. I mean, we can't go anywhere without, you know, billboards, Instagram, you know, like all these different methods. So we experience the world very differently than we did 30 years ago, I think, before we had all this. So I find out like painters kind of in this dilemma.
Oh, I'm going to disagree with you there. I like
Excellent.
all of
Good.
what you said, though I'll touch on a few things. I think it's not a dilemma. It's more room. I mean, I think it's maybe the photographer sculptor Thomas Damon said something like there are more pictures of the world than the world, and that's something that's inspiring to him. And I don't see that as separate. I think because there are more pictures of the world, there's more world. And you know, to back up a little bit in time and in media, we used to look at artworks on slides. We used to hold them up to the window or look on a slide table with a loop to sort of look at like, oh, these are really nice paintings, and it's, you know, an inch and a half across. Our screens are much more dynamic. And looking at holding an iPad or an iPhone and sort of getting instant information that way is something I find really inspiring, because I want the surfaces of my paintings to glow. I want there to be this luminosity that is, you know, intimate and almost sort of handheld when you get up next to these paintings.
Yeah.
I don't want you to see the paintings in person and go like, oh, it's kind of a letdown. No, it's even better. So if the image you saw on a screen or on a website enticed you, and you get the opportunity to go into a gallery and see them, I just want that to be even more. And so I think it all adds together in a way. It's confusing to navigate sometimes, don't get me wrong. Clearly, I didn't understand that I had the most updated app to start this talk. However, I kind of think it's all fascinating.
Oh, I do too. And could you, like kind of on that same train of thought, you were talking about like what you wanted out of your paintings, what your objectives were. Could you also maybe talk about your process of like how you come up, how you like maybe conceiving of the paintings, like, you know, like what is my composition going to be like for this painting? And then like the process of how you actually paint it, and even your color choices.
Right. Well, I try to draw very often, if not every day, as much as I can. And I tend to draw with Photoshop because I can select colors more quickly and make shapes in a way where I'd be using maybe rulers and things on paper and in graph paper how I used to draw maybe 10 or years ago or more. But so it does start from drawings with variations and drawing in color. It's not necessarily black and white. And so there is a lot of planning, invention, what if this was twice the size? What if I cut this in half? And what if I sort of put these two ideas together in a way? And how it not works, generate maybe another idea for me? And earlier you said sensation, and I think that is a really important word for me, that is both like the effect that we feel from the paintings and also the subject matter. I want to be excited and surprised, and I want to have discovery, but I also think that is something that is not an image, but it is what I want to convey. And so if people feel like they're looking up at the sky, or if there's sort of some sort of submerged, like sort of like deep watery, like behind me with this sort of aquas sort of overlaying, and that takes us to a place that is related to a sensation. I think that's really important. So knowing that I want to sort of get to those places or convey those feelings is a part of like, what makes me think I can get there. Is it this contrast of like flipping back and forth to create motion in the painting? Is it a slow gradation from one color to another? And I sort of look at what my options are based on what colors can do, and try to trust myself intuitively to get to those ideas into color on canvas.
Yeah. So your process, is that, I remember you telling me a number of years ago that you use squeegees and are you using ink, or is this acrylic paint?
Both good questions, and it's all acrylic paint. A lot of matte medium and masking tape. I use putty knives and sort of drywall sort of knife tools that might be 12 inches across down to 3 inches. And that's what I'm sort of pulling the paint into the masked off areas and stencils that I create. And I'm using X-Acto knives and cutting mats to sort of get the curves of shapes that I want so they interlock like a puzzle. I'm not using ink. I'm not using oil paint. There's something about the flexibility and speed with which acrylic dries that is really helpful for me. Just, the layering that I want to do. I think you asked another question about process that I don't know if I answered. Did I miss something there?
The other one, because I think it's somebody that, this is a question, I think, when people see your paintings, it comes up immediately. They have such a very strong, defined color palette and color, for like each of your paintings. There's harmony, there's conflict. I look at it a little bit like, like a guitar player that's playing a chord. There are like two notes in that chord that go together. There's one that's dissonant, that doesn't go with it, but it also rounds it out, right? Because it's like having a cake with too much sugar in it. If you have too much sugar, it's just like sickeningly sweet. So you have to have something that kind of balances it and makes it bigger. And that's how I see your color palette as well.
Oh, that's a really good way of putting it, Paul. Thank you so much for, relating it to other senses, because I think that's very important and something I strive to do. And I don't know that it always comes across, but I often think about sounds and different types of music. In the studio this morning, we were listening to trip hop to get started. So there was a lot of like sampling and record scratching. And there is this kind of like interruption or distortion that happens with sound to something that's already existing. So our expectations are kind of caught off guard, and that's stimulating. With guitar, if it's like a shoegaze band that's using like, feedback or whammy bars to kind of bend sounds, it's like, no, that initial red isn't good enough. We have to like put magenta and gray next to it, and then we'll notice it more and maybe differently. And so it is it's not just one sound in the room. It's, you know, the hum of maybe something outside. It's, you know, if we're really quiet, our own heartbeat. And so there's a lot of color, and each color affects another, and it could relate to taste, something salty and sweet. I know I love salted caramel, and it's that combination of things.
Exactly.
And I want to have combinations. And I want to have combinations of colors.
Yeah, I see these paintings very much like that, that there's so much about that experience, which again, outside of imagery, you know, when we're looking at these paintings and it's like, wow, what's going on here? You know, it's like, there's, like you said, there's also like sound and there's nuance. You know, I think this is a lot like to me, looking at your paintings is a lot like listening to music without lyrics. You know, there's no imagery, but at the same time, there's just that sensation and that kind of like pleasing sensation that doesn't say anything specific, but you do get sensation out of it, you know, and that sensation then can be interpreted in, you know, I mean, it becomes very subjective and very personal, you know. And nobody could be right about it. You know, Dion's paintings are not about, they're not about architecture at all, but they are about this, like maybe alluding to the sensation of these experiences, you know, but in a different way. And really, I think to me that's what makes them really wonderful paintings in 2021, you know, and not in a different era, but they're like very, very now, very expressive of this point in time. And I think there's some other artists that I really enjoy, contemporary artists that are also in LA Stories that are also kind of doing the same thing, or, you know, but maybe in a completely different way. But isn't that the beautiful thing, that these are just our expressions, the way that we want to express these things, or that we feel express them the best, you know? So
I feel like that I have a relationship, or I'm a part of a conversation in the LA Stories show. There's some artists that were like, I might have sort of known them and got to know them better through your curation. And there's some old friends there too. And I think that just, you know, makes me look at my work differently, and I feel a connection to other people. And that connection is really important these days, I think, if we're just sort of off a little more isolated than we'd like to be.
Very important.
and I also think that there, you know, I hear people, and I feel like I'm a little too close to the whole LA art scene to kind of separate myself from it. But I hear from other people say that, there's very much an LA aesthetic. You know, there's very much a way of thinking that artists have here that isn't New York, and it's not other places, but like, and that could be an attribute of so many different things. You know, it could be the fact that, you know, like weather can play a part in that, you know, where it might be different in being an artist in Seattle is different than being an artist in Portland or wherever, but it all kind of like adds to this whole kind of dialogue. And my own personal theory about this is that it goes back to Roland Rees. A lot of stuff goes back to Roland Rees. And I personally don't even know him. Like, I don't know, like, I knew him. I had some brief conversations, but I never studied with him. So I can say that like a little bit more, what I feel is a little bit more objectively. I'm not emotionally attached, but I've seen the influence of him as an artist, the great influence of him, and the legacy I think that he left behind. And Dion, you studied with him.
Yes, and a lot of respect, and a lot of how I got to know the Los Angeles, how it works in art, and is through coming to grad school. I was born in Ohio. I went to school in Ohio for undergrad, and that was a great experience. But I really had to sort of figure out what was going on with Roland Rees's acrylic field paintings, or how that related to a Craig Kaufman piece. And I didn't honestly know that hard edge painting was a term. Like, I knew East Coast painters like Ellsworth Kelly and always liked them, but learning who Helen Lundenberg, Carl Benjamin, Frederick Hammersley were was a new experience that felt very LA. A good friend of mine, Rebecca Ebel, who has a Contemporary Art Matters gallery in Ohio, invited me to curate a show which will open later this month. And she wrote this lovely little intro talking about how, very much like what you said, Paul, California is a different place. She grew up in Northern California and feels a connection to how there is light and space, and artists sort of make things differently, use color differently. And it is unique to our area, our city, and our sensibility. And I just think it's something to be celebrated.
Absolutely. And that's what Brenau University is doing.
Well, thanks to you, Paul, and thanks to all of our wonderful artists.
Yeah.
I'm going to interject for just a minute. We have a couple of questions, actually, a question for Paul and a question for Dion in the chat. So first question early on for Paul from John Marcella Grant was, what university gallery did you work at for so many years, Paul?
Well, I'm a tenured faculty at Cypress College, and I've been there for I'm trying to remember. I think this is my 26th year, and for 18 of those years, I ran the gallery at Cypress College.
Okay,
but which I no longer do.
Which is probably somewhat of a relief, because you get to focus on sort of one as opposed to all. We have a question, Dion, from Jay and Kim wants to know if you paint your canvases flat or vertically, so on the wall or on an easel.
Oh, good question. Flat on a tabletop is easier for me because the paint is so liquid. It needs to dry flat. It would run down and drip if I had it on the wall.
Yeah, that's exactly. It seems like in their question, they mentioned they had seen one many years ago and didn't see any traces of sort of that potential drip that you would have gotten from painting vertically. So that is a very interesting point and question. So thanks for answering that.
Yeah.
Oh, yes,
Absolutely.
of course. I like those questions because it gives you a better sense of like how they're made is what they are.
Right. And there's such a, an element of precision in them. And it's that precision that a lot of times, like, they almost look like they could be mechanically, somehow, almost like prints. Because there's so much precision. And again, like, a lot of, like, these color combinations are working so perfectly together, so I can see how that would come up. The one last thing, we vowed to make these no longer than 30 minutes long. And it has to do with short attention span theater, which is Instagram Live. But the last question I want to ask you is how you're an avid cyclist, and how does that relate to your paintings, or does it not relate to your paintings?
Oh, good question. And again, that's how they're abstract paintings, yes, but it's all these life experiences that go into them that make them, meaningful or personal to me. And bicycling is certainly something that how I like to experience the outside of Southern California, and we're really close to the mountains. I can bicycle up and down PCH and have the ocean breeze sort of come in as I look out across the water. And bicycling is a specific perspective where you are sort of scanning at all times this sort of space, but there's movement and motion at all times. When you turn, you lean, and there's angles, and you're it's about momentum and balance, and it's really wonderful. I mean, I sort of describe it as complicated, but it's also sort of fluid and free and natural. And I think, when I'm bicycling and taking in information in sort of strips or bits of angles and color, that type of motion and moving through space is sort of how I want my paintings to not stand still. I want them, even though paintings are kind of stupid still and don't really do anything. They're not a movie with a beginning, middle, and end.
Right.
Or there's no, but the good thing is in that respect is they're all there at once. And so it's like this blast of information, and that's really intense.
Yeah.
And so that intensity of bicycling or any sort of like movement, sport, sort of like where you're involved in this, very engaged way is how I want visually my paintings to be engaged.
Yeah. I personally, I feel that comes across. I mean, I relate to your paintings a little bit differently with that background information. It doesn't change anything. In fact, for me, it almost just more confirms, like my thoughts about them. So, but I really appreciate them, Dion. I think it's wonderful work, and I'm such a fan.
Well, thank you, Paul, and thank you,
Absolutely.
Nicole. I'm really glad I had a chance to say a little bit more and add to the show in this way. It's really great to, just be able to, show and tell and, thank you.
Yeah,
It's been great. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, Nicole, who do we have next week?
So next week we have Frito
Evers. He's gonna be here coming from Norway.
Same time, same place.
Same time, same place. But well, for us it's the same time, same place. But for him it's 9 hours ahead. So he's gonna be at like 10 o'clock at night. So that will be fun.
We'll need to make sure to remind him throughout the day to be taking his caffeine as needed. Yeah,
he does that. So awesome. You guys,
thanks, Greg, Janice.
Thank you so much. And this was so fun. And I absolutely love looking at Dion's paintings. I could do it all day. So
thank you.
Take care of you guys.
Okay.
See everybody next week.
Dion.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Nick.